At Kharis Spire Academy, cadets are taught that every survival exercise has a purpose. Stay in formation, follow the route, and make it back alive. Cale Arden is not so sure. When his own team pushes him onto the most dangerous path, he starts noticing things that do not fit. The timing is wrong. The route is changing. And someone above seems to know exactly what is about to happen. Cale came to this academy looking for answers. He may be about to find them in the worst possible way. The wind hit the outer skin of Kharis Spire like a giant hand testing a locked door. Far below the academy's training decks, the storm sea of Sereth Vale rolled under a sheet of dark cloud, bright now and then, with silent flashes inside the haze. Cale Arden stood on the staging deck with his hands loose at his sides and watched the lights along the floor count down to deployment. He was a human cadet in the lowest tactical band of the class roster, at least on paper, and his first goal was simple enough to keep hidden. He needed to survive this exercise long enough to stay inside the academy and learn why 3 cadets from earlier classes had vanished into training losses no one wanted to explain. To the rest of his team, paper mattered more than anything he had done in the past 3 weeks. They treated him like the weak link in a place built to punish weak links. From where Cale stood, the shape of the field looked simple enough. There was his own mixed cadet unit, already deciding who they trusted to keep them alive in the survival range below the cloud shield. Then there was training command above them, the officers who controlled the routes, the bridges, the weather windows, and every locked door between the deck and the storm ground. The immediate risk looked simple too. If the team pushed him out of the safe formation before deployment, he would go down on the exposed edge route, where the bridges were thinner and the shelter windows shorter. Around him, the other cadets kept their distance without pretending otherwise. A tall Varan named Talis stood with his group near the inner rail, shoulders broad, uniform sealed, voice low as he spoke to the others. Beside him, Mira's son from the navigation track. Checked her gloves twice and never looked in Cale's direction. Only one cadet, a compact gray-skinned systems student named Ivan Dorr, glanced his way at all, and even he looked away fast. The anti-storm braces under the deck gave a soft shudder. Most of the unit ignored it, but Cale did not. He lifted his eyes to the suspended command glass above the staging floor and saw 3 training officers standing shoulder to shoulder over a floating operations panel. They were barely talking. They kept checking the same line of numbers again and again. That was the first thing that bothered him. The second was the stillness in them. If the numbers were routine, they were staring too hard. If the numbers were wrong, none of them looked surprised. The vote deck opened on the far side of the staging bay, a half-circle platform with a waist-high rail and a line of standing consoles built for quick unit calls. Cadets moved toward it in a practice stream. No one had announced a formal challenge, but Cale saw Talis step onto the center plate before the officers had even called the unit forward. That was enough. Unit Kharis, 7 requests of field adjustment, Talis said. His voice carried across the deck with the kind of confidence that came from years of being the strongest person in the room. Training Officer Jalen Voss, the man at the nearest console, did not shut him down. He only folded his hands behind his back and said, "State it." Talis turned just enough for the others to see his face and for Cale to see the shape of the play. We remove Arden from the primary route team. He does not match survival performance for this range. Keeping him in the center formation puts the rest of us at risk. A murmur moved through the cadets. It was not shock. It sounded more like relief that someone had finally said it out loud. Mira spoke next without lifting her eyes from her wrist pad. He falls behind on every time climb. He doesn't fall behind, Ivan said quietly. He stops to look at things. Talis gave him half a glance. During a storm run, that is called falling behind. No one laughed, but the silence that followed did the same work. Cale watched faces instead of words. Talis was driving the motion. Mira was backing him because she wanted predictability more than fairness. 2 others were nodding because strong people often sounded right under pressure. Ivan looked uncertain, but uncertainty still counted when it stood beside the wrong side and stayed there. Training Officer Voss tapped the console once. Field adjustment request is valid under unit safety review. Cadets cast. So that was the shape of it. Kale had expected command to slow the vote if it threatened route balance. Voss did the opposite. He let it move cleanly, almost as if the room was stepping onto a mark already chosen. Kale did not speak yet. There was no value in defending himself against a room that had already decided what he was for. He kept his eyes on Voss instead. The officer's face stayed calm, but his left thumb moved in tiny beats against the inside seam of his sleeve, like he was counting time. Votes lit the arc one after another. Tallis. Mira. 2 more. Then another. Ivan hesitated. His jaw tightened. Then his console flashed too. The result line turned red. Voss looked down at the readout. Adjustment approved. Arden remains in the exercise. Arden moves to edge support on the outer descent route. Not expelled from the exercise. Just placed where the risk would hit first. Tallis finally looked at Kale directly. You should thank us. This gives you a chance to stay out of everyone's way. Kale met his eyes. That depends on what you think the exercise is. Tallis frowned, but only for a second. He took the line as wounded pride, which was safer for him than taking it seriously. The vote was over. Kale was still in the exercise, but no longer on equal footing with the rest of the team. He stepped off the center plate as the unit began to sort into deployment order. The outer route icon flashed beside his name on the wall display. It was one of the harsher lanes into the survival range, with a longer drop, more exposed bridge time, and fewer marked shelters. As the cadets moved, Kale looked back to the command glass above the bay. Officer Voss was speaking to another trainer now, one Kale did not know well, a lean woman with a black Storm Command tab on her collar. She gave the smallest nod. That was all. No visible panique. No direction. Just a quiet exchange that made the new formation look useful to them. Kale did not know for what yet, but he had stopped believing the vote belonged only to the cadets. The descent corridor to the lower shaft curved through the body of the tower like the inside of a giant engine. Locked doors opened in sequence as the unit moved down, boots striking metal in clipped rhythm, helmet seals clicking shut one by one. Past the view slits, the world outside was all layered cloud and a pale electric glow that came and went under the storm shield. A hollow map rolled across the wall ahead of them. The route looked simple on first glance. Drop to the first bridge node, cross the outer spine, reach shelter pocket 3 before the next storm cycle. Push from there to Beacon Ridge and complete extraction by the west descent lift. Most of the cadets focused on the last line only. Finish the route. Beat the other teams. Score high enough to move up. Kale watched the timing column instead. Something that was off. Not by much. Just enough to matter. The first bridge was set to lock earlier than standard range protocol for this class of exercise. The shelter window on the outer path had been tightened. Then he looked for the faint blue branch that should have marked the backup lane under the main descent route. It was not there. He slowed for half a step to check again. The data line remained clean and official. Too clean. Not missing by accident. Missing like someone had decided the branch should not appear at all. Officer Voss stood beside the final gate with his hands behind his back. You know the objective. Reach Beacon Ridge. Hold position for pickup. Use assigned routes. Do not deviate unless survival conditions force adjustment. Training command is monitoring. Monitoring what, Kale thought? Survival or obedience. He looked up at the gate marker. The wind pressure reading pulsed yellow. That was wrong too. If the outer route had shifted into yellow this early, then command either knew the storm edge was moving faster than planned or someone had updated the display to fit a different deployment schedule. Tallis caught him staring at the timing board. Still trying to make numbers like you? Kale did not look at him. Bridge 1 closes early. Mira answered before Tallis could. No, it doesn't. It does today. That made 3 cadets turn. Tallis stepped closer. You trying to scare people now? Kale pointed to the closure line, then to the shelter clock. Bridge 1 cuts sooner than standard. The shelter window is shorter too, and the backup branch is gone. If you're sending me to the edge, fine. But if anyone behind the lead pair runs this by the old pace, they get trapped between the lock and the weather. Voss said nothing. That silence landed harder than an argument would have. Mira looked from Kale to the board, then back again. You are reading the drill clock wrong. Kale held her gaze for a beat. I hope so. He meant it, but he did not believe it. No one else spoke. Tallis gave a short shake of his head and moved the team forward. The others followed him because that was easier than stopping the line 2 minutes before deployment and admitting the human at the bottom of the roster might be the only one paying attention. The final doors split open. Cold air rushed in so fast it felt solid. Kale stepped into the drop shaft last. As he crossed the threshold, he glanced once more at Voss. The officer's face stayed neutral. His thumb was not tapping anymore. That told Kale the waiting part was over. Whatever had been decided above the deck had already moved into motion. The survival range below the cloud shield looked less like a training ground than the broken backbone of a dead machine. Narrow bridges ran between black support towers. Anchor lines disappeared into mist. Beacon lamps pulsed through rain haze in long, weak intervals. Far beyond the first span, the shield line curved overhead like a dim ceiling, with a real storm moving under it in heavy bands of dark vapor. Team Kharis 7 spread into formation at the entrance platform. Tallis and Mira took the front. 2 cadets followed in the center. Kale was placed on the back edge, one rail away from open air and the long fall into the storm wells below. That was deliberate. It kept him out of the team's core, and it made him the first expendable body if the route went bad. The deck light turned green. Move, Tallis said. They crossed the first bridge in a hard, fast line. Wind struck the span. From below, lifting mist through the grated floor. Kale counted steps, anchor bolts, and lamp spacing while the others focused on speed. At the far end of the bridge, a shelter alcove sat empty, its doors still open, though the storm clock said it should have been cycling toward standby. That was another wrong detail. They entered the outer spine, a narrower route with exposed side rails and a long view over the churning cloud below. Communications crackled in their helmets, then thinned into bursts of static. Command link is weak, Mira said. It will clean up at Beacon Ridge, Tallis answered. Kale checked his wrist display. The signal loss was not random. It dropped hardest when their formation passed each relay pin, then improved slightly between them, as if someone had narrowed the communication lanes on purpose. He looked ahead. Beacon Ridge was farther than it had seemed on the corridor map. More important, the bridge markers were dimmer. One of the direction lights that should have flashed blue toward the safer interior line was dark. Hold, Kale said. No one stopped. The safe split is gone. Tallis turned his head just enough to show irritation, not concern. Keep moving. Kale raised his voice, sharp now. The split is gone. That made Mira slow and glance left. The side route opening that should have shown a blue guide beam, an emergency handrail down in a backup cover, was just black metal and dead lamps. For the first time, someone looked honestly unsettled. Then the sound came. It was not thunder. It was a heavy locking impact rolling through the structure behind them. One deep strike, then another, then the metallic groan of bridge seals taking load. Kale turned. The gate at the entrance platform was closing. Not cycling. Closing. Its warning lights flashed red through the rain haze, then vanished as the heavy shield plates sealed over the opening they had just used. Mira stared at it through the storm. That gate wasn't supposed to close yet. No, Kale said. Static filled the comm channel. Tallis barked for command and got nothing back but a burst of broken sound. One of the cadets in the middle spun toward the sealed entry behind them, then toward the dead side route, and the neat confidence of the formation started to crack at the edges. Kale looked at the map on his wrist, then at the actual bridge lights ahead. The pattern no longer matched. A safe line had disappeared. The return gate had shut early. Command had either failed to notice all of it or had chosen not to answer. Both possibilities landed in the same place inside Kale's head. This was no longer a normal exercise. He lowered his eyes to the storm timing bar and let the next thought settle before he trusted it. The route had not simply become harder. Too many changes were pointing the same way at once. The outer path had fewer shelters. The signal was being squeezed in the same zone. The return gate had shut while the dead backup branch still sat on the board. Someone had adjusted the range before the team ever stepped onto it, and those adjustments only made sense if this group had been meant to stay out here. And someone expected at least some of them not to come out. Once the entry gate sealed behind them, The survival range stopped feeling like a test and started feeling to Kale like a hallway with the lights turned off while someone listened from the other side of the wall. He did not know who was listening yet, but he knew what the team needed first. Reach shelter before the next storm band rolled through the open span, then find a way to get a signal out. Whatever the exercise had been on paper, it had become a race between the weather and the people who controlled the doors. Ahead of Kale, Tallis pushed the group into motion again. He did it fast, as if speed alone could force the range back into something familiar. Mira stayed near the front with her map open over her wrist display, trying to match route lines that no longer matched the metal under their boots. The outer spine narrowed after the first sealed gate. The rail dropped lower. The floor changed from broad graded panels to ridged plates broken by anchor joints and maintenance gaps. Beyond the rail, the storm wells breathed under the shield line in slow dark swells. Kale watched the marker lamps instead of the horizon. They were supposed to pulse in a steady sequence toward Beacon Ridge. Instead, the spacing was off. One lamp burned weak, then the next held too long. Then the third went dark entirely. Left. Edge, he said. No one answered. The deck dips there. Stay off it. The cadet behind Mira stepped where Kale had warned him not to. His boot hit a slick seam plate, skidded sideways, and vanished to the ankle through a half-open maintenance joint. He pitched hard toward the outer rail. Kale was already moving. He crossed 2 steps fast, caught the cadet's shoulder harness with one hand, and drove his own weight down against the inner support cable before the man could roll over the edge. The deck groaned under both of them. The trapped cadet let out a short broken sound and grabbed blindly for the rail. Stop fighting it, Kale said. Turn your foot with the seam. The cadet did it on instinct more than trust. Kale pulled once, hard and clean. The boot came free with a metal snap, and both of them dropped to one knee. For a second, no one spoke. Wind scraped across helmets and rails. Tallis looked back with anger first, then with something else that he buried just as quickly. The cadet Kale had pulled up was Ren Varek, one of the heavier assault track students who had cast his vote without hesitation. Ren stared at the split seam in the deck, then at Kale. That panel wasn't open on the map, Ren said. It isn't open on the map now, Kale answered. He rose and looked ahead. The path kept bending toward the exposed side of the range. The terrain itself was wrong, not damaged in a random way. Shifted in places that changed tempo, spacing, and shelter timing. Enough to punish any team that trusted the standard route without checking the structure around it. They moved again, slower now. Tallis did not thank Kale. He also did not tell him to stay quiet. That was the first real change. The second came 30 yards later when they reached the first beacon post and found its lens dead and cold. Mira stepped up beside it and touched the housing with 2 gloved fingers. This one should be live. Kale looked at the power feed running into the base. The cable had not burned out. It had been disconnected at the maintenance latch. Someone had turned it off by hand. They left the dead beacon behind and pushed toward the next span, a narrow storm bridge running between 2 training blocks suspended. Over a deeper drop, the bridge should have led them straight to Shelter Pocket 3. Instead, it hung ahead in the rain like a trap line pulled tight between 2 hooks. Mira finally slowed enough to let Kale come alongside her. Her voice stayed low inside the helmet channel. You saw the seam plate before and stepped on it. Kale kept his eyes on the bridge locks. I saw the runoff pattern. She gave him a brief look. You could have said that before. I did. That ended that. At the bridge threshold, Tallis raised a hand and the group stopped. The far side shelter light was on, but weak. Wind drove sheets of mist across the span. The bridge could be crossed. The question was whether it would stay open long enough for all of them. Kale checked the latch lights along the near frame. Green, green, yellow on the last one. Wrong again. Don't bunch up, he said. Cross in pairs. Leave spacing. Tallis turned, irritation snapping back into his voice because fear needed somewhere to go. You're not setting movement. No, Kale said. The bridge is. He pointed to the latch line. Mira saw it at once. Her mouth tightened. Why is the last lock cycling already? No one had an answer for that. Tallis made the choice anyway. Pairs. Move. He and Mira went first. They crossed hard, boots ringing across the graded bridge while wind shoved at their shoulders. 2 cadets followed them. Rin started onto the span with Ivan just behind him. Then every light on the near frame flipped from yellow to red. The bridge gave a warning tone. Back, Mira shouted from the far side. Forward, Kale snapped at the same instant. Pain foes. That almost got him killed. The first lock slammed half a beat early. The bridge shuddered under his boots, and one side rail folded inward by a foot. Ivan dropped flat and grabbed the grating. Rin staggered into the tilt and nearly went over the outer edge. Kale hit the bridge from behind, one hand catching Ivan's harness, the other driving into Ren's back to force him toward the far platform before the second lock fired. Tallis lunged from the other side and seized Ren's arm. Mira grabbed Ivan's sleeve as Kale shoved him the last yard across. The second lock struck with a heavy metallic crash right behind Kale's legs. He threw himself forward. The bridge split up the center seam and began to retract. Kale landed shoulder first on the far platform, rolled once, and came up on a knee as the span folded away into the wall slots. The remaining cadets, still on the near side, shouted through static. One of them pounded the rail, then stopped when he saw the gap widening into open storm air. No one on either side moved for a full second. Then Tallis rounded on the sealed bridge mouth. That was not a cycle fault. No, Kale said. The word came out flat because by then there was no point wasting emotion on what had become obvious. A normal failure would have locked the span open or dead. This one had waited until half the team committed, then tried to split the unit in the worst possible place. Mira checked her board with quick, angry motions. The route marker just duplicated. She sent the map overlay to the local team channel. Kale saw it at once. 2 direction arrows now pointed to the same shelter from opposite angles, each claiming priority timing. That should have been impossible under range protocol. On the wall beside the folded bridge housing, a maintenance lens blinked once through the rain. Kale looked straight at it. That camera should have been dark in storm mode. The blink stopped immediately. He said nothing for a breath, just long enough to line the pieces up in his head. Early bridge closure. Conflicting route signals. Live observation in a zone that should have been half blind under current weather load. The changes were not only being made. Someone was watching to see what the trap team did with them. He turned back to the divided team. There will be another way across farther in. We move to the shelter first. Tallis stared at him. You sound very sure. Kale met the look without heat. I sound like someone who doesn't want the next door to close with us standing under it. That landed. Tallis said nothing after that. He helped pull the remaining 2 cadets toward the shelter route. And for the first time since the vote deck, nobody told Kale to stay in the back. Shelter Pocket 3 was not really a room. It was a reinforced notch cut into the side of training block, just big. Enough for a unit to get out of the wind and wait through a short storm pulse. The curved door sealed behind them with a tired hiss. Interior lights came on a moment later, dim and amber. Kale counted heads on reflex. 6 with him. 2 cut off across the lost bridge. Communications to them were thin to the point of uselessness. The shelter smelled faintly of machine oil and old wet metal. Emergency racks lined one wall. A cracked water unit sat under the far display. It would have looked almost ordinary if not for the red maintenance light blinking over the interior communications port. Mira leaned against the wall and tried the port anyway. Static answered her. Tallis paced once, stopped, then hit the panel with the heel of his hand. Command, this is Kharis 7 outer route. We were split by an unscheduled bridge closure. Respond. Nothing. Rin sat on the lower bench, still breathing hard from bridge. He looked toward Kale, then away, ashamed of the look almost as much as the need behind it. Ivan, on the other hand, kept staring at Kale openly now, as if he were trying to rebuild the picture of him from scratch. Tallis turned back. Say it. Kale had been watching the shelter door cycle timer. What? You think you know what is happening. Say it. Kale pushed off the wall and stepped toward the room's center, not far enough to make it a performance. Just far enough that no one had to pretend not to hear. We were given the outer route after a vote command had every reason to deny. They approved it. The bridge locked early. The first beacon was manually disabled. The route board duplicated signals. A storm camera stayed live where it should have gone blind. That isn't one failure. Mira straightened. You think someone is moving us. I think someone wants us moving where they can predict us. Why this team? Rin asked. That was the better question. Kale looked at each of them once, searching faces and memory. What do you all have in common? Tallis gave a short, humorless laugh. Apparently bad luck. No, Ivan said before Kale could. His voice was quiet but steady. Maybe not. Everyone turned toward him. Ivan swallowed. 3 days ago, after the weather relay lecture, records access dropped for 10 seconds in archive wing. 2. I thought it was a routine lockout. I was pulling old range failures for systems comparison. A few of you were there. Myra's expression changed first. I was there. Rin looked up from the bench. So was I. I only saw one file tag. Training loss review. Tallis frowned. You never told us that. Because it vanished, Mira said. The whole directory collapsed before I could open anything. Ivan looked at Kale now. You were in the archive too. Kale gave the smallest nod. The room got quieter after that. In Kale's head, the line between the shelter and the archive finally stopped being a hunch and became something firmer. The trap names in the range matched the cadets who had stood too close to the wrong records when Archive Wing 2 opened for those 10 seconds. Not proof yet, but enough for the fear in the room to take a shape the others could follow. The team was no longer trying to win the exercise. They were trying to understand why the Academy wanted them boxed in. The shelter door light flashed yellow. Kale checked the timer and swore under his breath. Storm front is shifting early. We move now. Tallis opened his mouth, probably to argue about direction. Then he shut it again. That was the second real change. The relay outpost sat beyond a broken maintenance lane, half hidden under the angled shadow of an old sensor mast. It was not on the cadet-facing route map, which was exactly why Kale chose it. If someone was hurting them along the official lines, then the fastest way to learn anything was to step off those lines before the next door closed. He told the team that much as they left the shelter. Not everything, just the part they needed in order to follow him. The outpost is a service node, he said while they moved single file along the narrow lane. Small relay, local weather feed, emergency uplink if it is still live. If the line works, we can force a signal out. If it doesn't, we may still get a local log. Either way, whoever is doing this has to react. That sounds like a guess, Tallis said from behind him. It is a target, Kale answered. That is all we need right now. The wind was lower on this side of the block, but the cover came with worse footing. The maintenance lane dropped between support braces and bent toward the old mast in 3 short angles. Kale called each turn before they took it. Left at the brace. Down 1 level. Watch the wet rung. Right through the service gap. The rail is loose. No one complained now. Fear had turned all of them into better listeners. They reached the outpost door and found it half jammed open. Inside, dead screens lined the walls around a central relay chair and a compact local console. Dust lay along the lower edges, but not on the main controls. Used recently, Mira moved straight to the console. Ivan took the opposite side. Kale kept his rifle low and watched the entrance while they worked. Power, he asked. Local only, Mira said. Long-range line is cut. Can you pull anything? A short buffer log, maybe. Ivan gave a sharp breath. I've got recent access. From command. Tallis asked. No. From here. Someone patched through this relay during live storm mode. That was it. Not proof enough for a tribunal. More than enough for survival. Mira dragged a narrow line of text onto the local pad and froze. There's a tagged list. Kale crossed to her side. It was only a partial log, maybe the tail end of a sync packet before the feed had been purged. But the names were there. Not all of them. Enough. Mira Sen. Even Dor. Patenvike. Kale Arden. 2 others from the split section. A designation at the top marked them for route variants under command override. Kale read it twice to make sure the line meant what it looked like it meant. Route variance was not a weather note. It was a routing instruction. Override meant someone above the cadet level had forced it through. Selected before deployment. The sound at the door was small. Just a boot brushing metal. Kale moved first. He hit the console down with one hand and drove Mira toward the side wall with the other, as a flash burst through the half-open entry and smashed into the back screen rack. The outpost lights died. Sparks sprayed across the floor. "Down," he shouted. Tallis dragged Run behind the relay chair. Ivan dropped flat and crawled for the lower panel. Another flash slammed the doorframe, close enough to shake rust from the upper track. Not training. Fire. Too controlled, too tight, and too little warning. Shapes crossed the entrance in the dark. Not cadets. Full gear. Clean movement. The first wave of the hunt had arrived. Kale lunged to the console, ripped the data slate free of its short lock, and stuffed it into his chest rig as the team scrambled for cover. He had the log now, or at least a piece of it. Not enough to end anything. Enough to prove the pattern. "Rear vent," he said. "Move." "There is no route on the map," Tallis said. Kale pointed to the maintenance grate low on the back wall. "Then stop using the map." The next impact hit the relay chair and split its frame. That got them moving. Kale pulled the rear grate loose, with Tallis helping on the second corner. Mira shoved Ivan through first, then Run. Another controlled flash crossed the room, forcing them all lower. Kale fired one short covering burst at the doorway, not to win, just to make the attackers hesitate. It worked for half a second. Half a second was enough. He dropped through the rear duct last and kicked the grate back into place above him just as metal boots crashed into the outpost room. The duct stank of dust and old coolant. It angled down toward some deeper service line, narrow and blind and better than a room they had just left. They crawled hard until the sounds behind them blurred into the storm again. When they finally slid out into a lower service trench, Mira rolled on her back and looked at Kale like she had never really seen him before. "What did you pull?" she asked. Kale took the slate from his rig, checked the crack screen, and felt the last doubt burn away. The names were still there. So was the override line. He looked up at the others, at the rain running off the trench wall, at the broken shape their team had become since the vote deck, and gave them the bluntest version first. "We were picked before we ever stepped onto the range," he said. No one argued, because now he had proof. Proof did not keep rain off metal or hunters off a trail. In the lower service trench beneath the storm range, Kale's immediate goal was simpler than truth. Keep the group moving. Keep the slate intact. Get them to a relay line before whoever had tagged their names could close the walls around them. The trench ran under the cloud shield like a wound cut into the Academy's lower bones. Water streamed along the channel floor in silver lines. Pipes hugged the wall on one side. On the other, the trench opened at intervals to black drops where maintenance crews once lowered equipment into the storm wells. Kale crouched at the corner of a support buttress and checked the cracked data slate again. The list was still there, though half the lower lines had been scorched by the blast in the relay outpost. Names. Route override markers. A short access tag he did not recognize. That tag mattered. He could feel it. He just could not place it yet. Behind him, the others huddled in a shallow break in the trench wall. Tallis kept watch toward the rear. Mira knelt beside Ivan, who was trying to coax more light out of his wrist display. Rin sat with his back to the pipeline, breathing slower now, no longer hiding that he was waiting for Kale to decide the next move. "We can't stay here," Mira said. "I know. Then where?" Kale looked up the trench. "There should be a maintenance ledge under the west shield braces. It runs parallel to the marked route, but stays off the main sensor line. We use that until we can cut into a relay shaft." Tallis frowned. "You know that from where?" "From paying attention." Tallis let out a tight breath, frustrated by how useless that answer was and by how little room he had left to reject it. Kale did not offer more. He could not explain everything without explaining too much, and the storm range was not the place for speeches. Ivan broke in before Tallis could push harder. "He's right about the ledge. I saw something like it on an old systems layout in Archive Wing 2. That made everyone look at him." Ivan swallowed, then forced himself to keep going. Not a full map, just a maintenance overlay. It flashed when the locked files opened for a few seconds. Myra's face tightened. "You saw the files longer than you said before." "I saw enough to know they were not random maintenance notes." He looked at Kale, then away. There were incident lines. Same range, different classes. The wording changed, but the outcome didn't. Missing cadets. Storm exposure. Route failure. Systems loss. It all read too clean. Tallis stared at him. And you said nothing? Ivan flinched. I tried to reopen it later. The record was gone. Rin spoke from the wall. So we were picked because we saw a bad file? Not only that, Kale said. They all turned toward him. He lifted the slate just enough for them to see the names without seeing the damaged lower section. The people on this list were not the weakest cadets. They were the ones who touched something, noticed something, or asked the wrong follow-up. The range isn't trying to eliminate failure. It is cleaning loose ends. No one liked the shape of that truth, but it fit too well to deny. Mira wiped rain from her visor. Then the old losses weren't losses. No, Kale said. Not the way the Academy reported them. The group went quiet after that. The storm made a long, hollow sound overhead, like a train passing over sheet metal. The worst part was not fear anymore. It was recognition. They were being hunted because they knew too much, not because they were too weak to survive. Kale slid the slate back into his chest rig. Move. West ledge first. Talk later if we live long enough. No one argued. The trench narrowed, then opened through a service notch into the west ledge approach. The sound changed with it. The enclosed pipe echo gave way to open rain and a deeper wind onto the shield seam. The maintenance ledge was narrower than Kale had hoped and more exposed than the trench. It ran along the outside of a lower support wall onto the shield line, half hidden by rain curtains and rusted service braces. The path was barely wide enough for one person at a time. On their left, the Academy's lower hull rose in wet black plates. On their right, the ledge dropped away into cloud and stormlight. Kale led. Mira followed close, then Ivan, Rin, Tallis, and the last two cadets from the outpost escape. The order was not random. Kale put the fastest thinker behind him and the strongest body near the back where someone might have to shove or catch. He called the path as he walked. Brace ahead. Duck under it. Loose plate. Step wide. The ledge. Bends left after the drain line. Stay on the wall. The rain thickened as they moved deeper under the broken shield seam. It came in hard sideways sheets now, driven by pressure surges that made the braces hum. Kale felt the structure through his boots more than he heard it. The storm was pushing up. That alone would have made the route dangerous. The worst problem was that someone above seemed to know exactly where they had chosen to go. The first sign was a drone light. Not a large one. Just a cold blue blink on the lower edge of the wall ahead, there and gone. Kale stopped so sharply Mira nearly ran into him. What is it? She asked. He pointed without speaking. The light came again from a seam above a drainage vent. It was not a navigation marker. It was too focused, too still, and placed where no cadet route should have had active observation in current weather. They found the ledge, Mira said. They never lost it. A sharp metallic crack sounded from behind them. Tallis turned at once. Movement rear, he said. Kale looked over his shoulder. 3 figures were descending onto the trench access 40 yards back, using guidelines from the upper brace level. Their helmets were sealed dark. Their gear matched training command colors, but the way they moved had none of the staged visibility of Academy instructors. No warnings. No challenge call. Just fast pursuit. Forward. Kale said. Now. They ran. The ledge became a ribbon under their boots. Water kicked off the edge in white bursts. One of the rear cadets slipped on a slick seam, caught the wall, and kept moving. Kale counted the distance to the next ladder break and did the math in his head. Too far for a clean outrun. The hunters had better footing on the descent lines and no need to protect cadets. A controlled burst snapped into the wall near Tallis, showering sparks across the rain. They are firing live, Tallis shouted. Keep moving, Kale said. The ledge bent around a support rib and narrowed again into a cliff route where the outer rail was gone entirely. Ahead, a vertical ladder climbed toward a service hatch cut into the wall. It was old, narrow, and half exposed. Bad in weather. Better than the open path. Ladder, Kale called. One at a time. No hosetastion. Mira went first, then Ivan. Run grabbed the rungs after them and started up hard, boots slipping once before he found rhythm. Kale turned to cover the rear for the rest of the group. Another burst struck the wall below his shoulder. The hunters were closer now, using the bend in the ledge to force his people into one line and one exit. Smart. Too smart for improvisation. The last cadet in line, a wiry atmosphere trainee named Sarah, hit the cliff bend and froze. Not from fear alone. A section of the outer ledge had peeled away under the ladder approach, leaving a jagged gap between her and the base rungs. She could jump it in dry conditions. In that rain, with a pack on her back and live fire behind her, the jump looked fatal. Hurry! Tallis yelled from the ladder. Sarah looked at the gap, then back at the advancing shapes, and lost the ability to choose. Cale had the slate in his rig. The only full name list they possessed was in that cracked piece of data. If he went to Sarah and slipped, he could lose it. If he stayed where he was and tried to cover the line, she would almost certainly die, and the rest would hear it happen 10 feet from safety. He made the choice in less than a second. Cale ripped the slate free and shoved it at Myra's hand as she clung halfway up the ladder. Take it. Her eyes widened, but she took it. Then he turned, sprinted the last 2 steps towards Sarah, and jumped the broken section from the wrong side, landing hard on the crumbling lip beside her. The ledge shivered under both their weights. Look at me, he said. She did barely. You're not jumping long. You're stepping short and letting me throw the rest. Understand? Sarah nodded once. The next burst hit the wall behind them and tore sparks through the rain. Cale hooked one arm through her harness, counted with his breath, then drove both of them forward. Sarah's boots hit the near edge of the gap and slid. Cale took the full jolt through his shoulder and slammed her into the ladder base hard enough to make her cry out. Tallis leaned down from above, caught her chest strap, and hauled. Cale reached for the rung, just as another burst struck the broken lip where he had launched. The ledge section gave way beneath him. For one clean, empty second, he was hanging over nothing. Then Wren's arm shot down from the ladder side, locked on Cale's wrist, and held. Tallis grabbed the back of Cale's harness. Between them, they dragged him into the rung line as the broken ledge vanished into the cloud below. They climbed with the hunters almost on top of them. At the hatch, Mira hauled the wheel with both hands while Ivan fought the jammed seal. The door cracked open just enough. Cale shoved Sarah through, then Run, then Tallis. He was last to enter, and the hatch slammed shut behind him with a booming impact that echoed down the shaft. For a moment, all of them lay on the chamber floor, wet, shaking, breathing too fast. Mira still had the slate in her hand. Its screen was spiderweb now. A corner chip had broken away during the climb. She looked at it, then at Cale. I lost the lower section. He took the slate back and checked. More data had gone. Enough to hurt. Not enough to make the choice wrong. The room was silent, except for rain hammering the hatch and the far-off ring of metal outside, as the hunters searched for another way in. Sarah pushed herself up on one elbow and stared at Cale as if gratitude made her uncomfortable. Wren looked away first. Then Tallis said the one thing Cale had not expected to hear from him so soon. You should have kept the slate. Cale slid it into his rig again. No. That answer ended the argument before it could begin. It also changed the air in the room more than any apology would have. Outside, the hunters stopped trying to hatch. A different alarm began to sound somewhere deeper in the wall. Cale listened to the pattern and felt his stomach tighten. It was not random searching. The sound was moving by section, clean and deliberate. Whoever was running the hunt had seen enough of his choices now to start shaping the next trap around them. The relay shaft opened into a communications maintenance chamber 2 levels above the ladder hatch, reachable through a narrow service crawl that smelled of dust, rain, and hot wiring. Cale chose it because there were only 2 reasons to. Keep a chamber like that partially powered during storm lockdown. Either the Academy still needed it, or someone inside the Academy was using it. He needed either answer. Mira and Ivan came with him. The others stayed below at the hatch room to hold the only retreat path they had left. Tallis did not like splitting again. He liked having no choices less. We hold 10 minutes, Tallis said. Then we move whether you're back or not. Cale nodded once. If anyone comes through that hatch before then, don't hold the room. Fall deeper into the spine and keep moving west. He did not say why. He did not need to. If the chamber above turned into another trap, the last thing he wanted was the whole group boxed under it. The crawl ended at a thin access panel. Kale eased it open by an inch and looked through. The maintenance chamber beyond was small and sharply lit, a contrast so sudden it hurt after the dark routes outside. Tool racks lined one wall. A suspended operations table floated at the center. Most important, a man in training command gray stood over a live control board, one hand moving across route icons with the calm speed of someone not improvising at all. Mid-level rank tab, weather operations track. Not senior enough to design the whole system. Senior enough to run a slice of it. Kale recognized him from the staging deck. Lieutenant Ohing Vali, one of the officers who had been staring at the same line of numbers before deployment. Kale opened the panel all the way and stepped inside with Mira and Ivan at his shoulders. Vale spun toward them, shocked just long enough to be honest. That was useful. You were not supposed to be on this line, Vale said. Kale raised his weapon, but did not fire. And yet, Vale's gaze flicked to Mira, then to Ivan, then to the water running off Kale's sleeves and boots. He understood quickly. The outpost team had failed. The ledge route had failed. The names on his board were no longer moving the way they were meant to move. Mira saw the screen first. He is still routing us. Kale stepped closer. The board showed live markers for every surviving cadet in the range. Some tags were green. Theirs were amber. A separate layer pulsed beneath the map with command. Override trails and storm lock timing windows. Kale took in the layout before he spoke. The top layer showed where cadets were. The lower layer showed what command was doing to the routes around them. That was enough to pin intent to action. The storm range was only the killing ground, Kale said. The real design started inside the academy long before the teams were deployed. Vale's face hardened at that. You do not know what you are talking about. No. Kale, move the muzzle just enough to point at the board. Then explain route variance orders tied to cadet names. Vale said nothing. Ivan stepped in beside Kale, eyes fixed on the screen. There are archived lost files linked to this access tree. I knew it. Vale looked at him with something close to contempt. You knew nothing. You saw fragments and made yourself dangerous. There it was. Not a denial. A judgment. Mira caught it too. So this is real. Vale's jaw tightened. This academy trains command-grade survivors. Weak links get people killed later. Some corrections happen early. Kale felt the room narrow around that sentence. Corrections. Vale met his eyes now. There are classes the academy cannot afford to graduate. He said it like policy. Like weather. Kale took one step closer. Who gave the order? Vali hesitated. That hesitation was answer enough that he did not own the top of the chain. You are not the last link, Kale said. Vale gave a small, humorless smile. No, and that is why it does not matter whether you walk out of this room. His hand moved, not toward a weapon, toward the purge strip on the lower edge of the board. Kale lunged and drove his forearm into Vale's chest before the man could complete the motion. The two of them hit the operations table together. Mira slammed the purge hand away, while Ivan reached across the board and killed the local delete queue. Vale twisted hard, trying to throw Kale off balance. He was older and heavier, but he was not built for close quarters. Kale used the wall, the table, and the wet floor better. A short struggle later, Vale hit the deck with Kale's knee pinning his shoulder. Who is above you? Kale asked. Vale laughed once through clenched teeth. By the time the hunt cycle closes, every live log in this range will be gone. Mira went pale. How long? Vale looked at her instead of Kale. Less than an hour. That was the first true clock they had heard. Less than an hour to reach whatever core node controlled final deletion. Less than an hour before proof turned back into rumor and dead cadets into official accident lines. Kale pressed harder, just long enough to make sure Vale understood the stakes had shifted. Where? Vale closed his mouth. Ivan looked over the board with shaking hands. There's a final sync path. West spine, split bridge zone. It leads to the upper service core. Kale followed his line of sight. There it was. Not labeled plainly, but visible if you knew what to look for. Vale stopped laughing. That told Kale Ivan had found the right trail. They left the chamber with a copied route strip, one partial command key, and less time than Kale wanted. They did not take Vale with them. There was no clean way to move a prisoner through storm routes while being hunted, and Kale knew the man well enough now to know he would weaponize every second. So they locked him in his own chamber, stripped the room of the easiest control tools, and ran. The path out of Vale's chamber dropped through a service notch, crossed a short brace passage, and opened onto the west spine. The air changed again there, cleaner for one breath, then colder as the storm found them through the split structure ahead. The west spine began as split bridge zone suspended between two broken service towers. Rain fell harder there, driven almost sideways now. Alarm lights pulsed through the mist, painting the metal red in long wet beats. Below the bridge, the storm wells churned with slow flashes far under the shield line. Kale reached the threshold first and stopped dead. The route strip in his hand showed two possible crossings. The real structure showed one intact bridge and one collapsed half-span. At the same time, his wrist display lit with an override arrow pointing them toward the broken side. False guidance. Ignore the board, he said. Take the left span. Tallis, now back at his shoulder, looked once at the false arrow and swore under his breath. They are hurting again. Yes. The first half of the group started onto the left bridge. Then the alarm tone changed. Not storm. Structure. Kale looked up just in time to see the far locking frame shift. Move, he shouted. The bridge began to retract from the far end. Mira and Ivan were already on it. Rin was 2 steps behind them. Sarah froze at the threshold. Tallis shoved her forward. The span jerked again, metal shrieking as it drew back into the tower housing. There was only one way to get everyone over. Kale grabbed the loose maintenance line running beside the frame, clipped it to his harness, and sprinted onto the narrowing bridge while the others scrambled ahead. He hit Run between the shoulder blades and drove him into a running jump toward the far platform. Tallis threw Sarah after him. Mira caught Ivan. Rin hit the deck hard and rolled clear. The gap widened. Tallis turned to jump back for Kale. Don't, Kale shouted. He meant it as an order and got obedience that time. The maintenance line snapped tight as the last bridge section tore away under his boots. Kale swung hard toward the opposite service rib, slammed shoulder first into the wall, and caught a handhold on instinct. Pain shot down his arm. Across the widening gap, Tallis reached for him and missed by a foot. The remaining bridge section folded fully into the tower. The split was complete. On the far platform, the others were trapped without him. On Kale's side, red lights flared along the service rib, and a new line of system tones rolled through the wall behind him. Different from pursuit mode. Colder. Cleaner. Final. He pulled himself onto the narrow rib, breathing hard, and looked up at the nearest access panel. The range was no longer trying to steer them. From a sound pattern, Kale read something worse. It was moving into a final sweep. The pressure phase was over. Cleanup had started. Kale was alone now, cut off from the only people left alive who trusted him, with less than an hour on the clock and the Academy closing its hand around every route ahead. He pushed himself to his feet anyway. There was still a way forward. There had to be. With less than an hour on the white clock and no room left for guesswork, Kale's goal was no longer escape. He needed a path back into the Academy's live control spine, a way to reach the others before. The sweep tightened, and one clean route toward the core that could erase everything. The red service rib under his boots was barely wider than a maintenance rail. Rain ran down it in thin, shining sheets. To his left, the outer shell of Kharis Spire rose in black plates and sealed seams. To his right, the storm wells rolled under the cloud shield like a living trench. He crouched by a panel seam and checked the copied route strip from Lieutenant Vale's chamber again. The map was incomplete, but one branch mattered. Weather relay feeder. Storm lock cluster. Outer ring access. Control spine beyond. If the Academy intended to sweep the obvious cadet routes clean, then the only surviving path would be one built for technicians and emergency crews. Kale worked the panel open with the edge of his knife and slipped inside a maintenance crawl lined with cable trunks and old coolant lines. The space was tight enough to bruise elbows on both walls. Good. Tight spaces slowed sweep teams and made them trust their sensors more than their eyes. He moved fast, counting turns from memory as much as from the damaged route strip. He had studied the Academy's support design before applying, not because he loved architecture, but because 3 old training losses had all vanished inside zones where the public maps ran out and the maintenance logic took over. That had never felt like coincidence. A warning tone rolled through the metal under him, low and clean and distant. Not a weather alarm, not a bridge lock either. A sectional closure sweep. Cleanup was moving west. Kale dropped through a feeder shaft into a lower service corridor, landed in a crouch, and listened. Bootsteps crossed somewhere above. 2, maybe 3 people. Measured pace, not cadets running scared. The hunt teams were still using the upper tracks. He took the floor route instead. The corridor didn't it at a sealed hatch, but the grate below it had the real answer. He tore it free and slid into a cable throat no sane student would choose willingly. He crawled through heat, dust, and the stink of old insulation until the throat opened into a relay junction chamber. 3 directions. 1 led up toward weather relay. 1 angled toward archive control. 1 ran west into a chain of storm lock chambers. He stood there for 1 short breath and sorted. The choices. Relay and archive mattered to the system. The storm locks mattered to the people still trying to stay alive. If the others were being herded, the system would push them toward a place it could narrow in time. That made the west line the likeliest meeting point and the likeliest trap. He took the west line. The access duct narrowed, then opened behind a vent screen that looked into a storm lock chamber wedge between 2 brace towers. The room was lit by amber emergency strips. 6 figures were inside. Tallis was pacing. Mira stood by the door panel with a handheld map stub. Ivan sat against the lock wheel with a portable relay node in his lap. Rin checked the seal on a borrowed rifle. Sarah and the last cadet, Lisa, guarded the outer wall. Alive. Kale tapped the back panel twice, paused, then once. The same pattern he had used before. Rin spun, weapon half raised, then froze. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled the service screen loose. For a second, no one moved. They all just looked at him, rain-soaked, scraped up, alive in the wrong place at the right time. Mira was the first to recover. You made it. Barely, Kale said as he climbed through. Seal that. Tallis shut the panel and leaned against it with both hands, not out of fear exactly, but out of the kind of anger that had run out of clean targets. You were gone too long. I had to find the live path. Kale pulled the copied strip from his chest rig and set it on the maintenance crate between them. I found part of it. Ivan was on his feet before anyone else. From Vale's chamber? Kale nodded once. Tallis stared at him. You got into a command room alone after the bridge dropped you into a death lane? I got into the room because the death lane led there. That answer bought him 3 seconds of silence. Then Mira stepped in before Tallis could turn the moment into a fight. What do we actually know? She asked. Kale pointed to the strip, then to the relay node in Ivan's lap. We know the wipe cycle is real. We know command override paths are feeding toward control spine sectors, not just weather routing. We know there is a final deletion window at the core level, and we know the people chasing us are not improvising. Peyton Faunu. You say that like you've expected this. Kale looked at the room, at the faces that had once voted him into the most exposed route and now waited for him to explain whether they had been wrong about him or whether he had lied to them from the start. Both were true enough to hurt. You want a short version? He asked. No, Tallis said. We want the honest one. The locked chamber fell still. Rain drummed against the outer wall in flat, heavy bursts. Kale gave them the piece they needed and nothing more. I came to Kharis Spire because I did not believe the old training losses were accidents, he said. 3 classes. Same range family. Same clean reports. Same missing details. Then Archive Wing 2 opened the wrong files for 10 seconds and proved someone had been scrubbing the edges. I needed to know whether the Academy had a broken system or a designed one. Myra's voice dropped. So you enrolled to investigate? Yes. You never told Command? I came because I did not trust Command. Tallis let out a slow breath through his nose. And you still walked into the exercise with the rest of us without saying a word. If I had said anything before I had proof, I would have been removed before deployment. Quietly, Kale looked straight at him. Now we have proof and a clock. That mattered more than the hurt in the room. They all knew it. Ivan lifted the relay node. He's right about the clock. This unit caught a sweep ping 2 minutes ago. Core sectors are locking in sequence. If the wipe reaches upper relay before we break the chain, every live log in this range becomes a clean accident report. Pain swole softly. Mira folded her arms tight across her chest, thinking fast. So surviving is not enough anymore. No, Kale said. The goal changed, Ivan said, almost to himself. Kale heard the line and pushed it one step further, so no one had to fill in the meaning alone. Running keeps us alive for a few more minutes. It has not stopped the wipe. If we run now, the Academy erases the dead and resets the system for the next class. No one challenged him after that. Tallis looked down at the strip, then back up. What do you need from us? That was the moment the room truly changed. Kale answered without hesitation. Trust me for the next hour. Not forever. Not after. Just now. Tallis held his gaze for one hard second, then nodded once. It was enough. The route to the relay tower outer ring ran through a brace corridor, a narrow lift spine, and a final exposed catwalk that wrapped the tower like a wet metal scar. Kale called every turn before they made it. Brace corridor ahead. Single file. Lift spine drops one level. Mind the broken rung on the right. Catwalk after the hatch. Stay on the inner rail. Wind pushes hard from the south. The group moved faster now, not because fear had vanished, but because confusion had. They knew what they were trying to do. Reach a relay line strong enough to throw part of the log outside the local system. Force a trace. Force a timestamp. Make deletion harder, even if not impossible. The outer ring was exactly the sort of place Academy designers would call safe enough for maintenance, and anyone else would call a death ledge. A circular platform clung to the outside of the weather relay tower just under the shield seam. Service pylons stood around it like stripped ribs. The storm beyond the rail was a wall of rolling dark shot through with pale, electrical flashes. Ivan dropped to one knee beside a relay cabinet and yanked the access skin free. This line is still live. How long? Mira asked. He checked the pulse feed. If they haven't noticed us yet, maybe 2 minutes. If they have, much less. They have, Kale said. He saw the first hunter team through the rain at the same instant. 3 shapes coming out of the brace hatch below, rifles up, using the tower supports for cover. Another team would come from above or from the opposite ring access once the system realized where the group had committed. Kale pointed without looking away. Tallis, run, with me on the lower arc. Mira, help Ivan. Sarah, Lisa, keep the upper hatch covered. Do not chase anyone through it. Just slow them. No one argued. That still felt strange. The first exchange hit the ring in a spray of sparks and shattered rain. Tallis took cover behind a support pylon and returned controlled fire. Down the lower arc, Rin stayed tighter to the cabinet line, watching for cross angles the way Kale had shown him earlier on a ledge he had nearly fallen from. It was not trust born of affection. It was trust born of survival. Ivan slammed a link spike into the relay cabinet and brought the portable node alive. The small device in his hands mattered because it could act like a temporary throat for the data. It was not a miracle machine, just a compact transmitter that might, if the timing was right, push a fragment of the log beyond the local deletion web before the system closed around it. What is it? Mira asked, forcing the cable into the second port. A relay burst node, Ivan said through his teeth. Think of it like shouting through one open window before the whole building gets sealed. How much can it carry? Not enough. Another burst ripped across the ring and blew a groove in the rail beside Sarah. She ducked, recovered, and fired back without losing her position. Kale leaned out from his pylon and caught one of the hunters moving between supports. The figure dropped flat. Not dead necessarily. Just forced down, which was all Kale needed. Time, not victory. Status, he called. Ivan's hands shook once, then steadied. I could send a partial packet. Names, timestamps, route overrides. Not the whole structure. Send it. Mira looked up. If we wait 10 more seconds, we might tag the command tree too. We may not have 10. That proved true immediately. The upper hatch will spun. Lisa fired first, driving the opening figure back into the ladder throat. Another team above. The ring was closing. Ivan shoved the burst node home. Packet building. Kale shifted to cover the upper side, but the lower hunters used the move against him and gained 2 pylons in one rush. Tallis caught the lead one with a hard shot to the shoulder plate. Rin forced the second to ground. The whole ring had become a machine built from seconds. Then Sarah made her choice. A lower control lever beside the relay cabinet had remained half hidden under a storm flap. She saw it before anyone else did. One pull would force the ring into maintenance lock for 20 seconds. The lock would reinforce the cabinet shield and stabilize the burst line. It would also seal the nearest retreat hatch on the same cycle. Sarah understood the trade before she asked the question. If I lock the ring, do we keep the line? Yes, Ivan said. And the hatch? Kale turned and saw it at once. He knew what she meant. The hatch seals, Mira said quietly. Sarah nodded once, already deciding. Kale stepped toward her. Do it only if you have to. She gave him a look that was somehow steadier than she had ever looked in class. We passed that point a while ago. Then she yanked the lever. Heavy locks slammed around the relay cabinet. A reinforced screen dropped over the node. The burst line stabilized. The hatch behind them began to close. The hunters heard the locks and pushed harder. That was the cost. Sarah threw herself across the narrowing hatch gap and took the forward side position, cutting off the first attacker long enough for the door to seal. She was inside, but now she was stuck on the most exposed arc of the ring with almost no cover and no retreat behind her. The burst node flashed green. Ivan shouted over the storm. Pack it away. For a breath, no one moved. Then the node flashed amber instead. That is not enough, Ivan said. It got out, but only part of it. They will see route tampering and selected names. They will not see the full control chain. Mira looked at the tower core door above the ring. Then we need the rest from inside. Kale knew she was right before she finished speaking. The burst had bought them something priceless and incomplete. A timestamp outside local control. A fragment of the truth. Enough to make deletion messy. Not enough to kill the machine. Fall to the upper access, he ordered. We go in. The ring turned ugly after that. Tallis took a hit across the outer plate of his left arm and nearly lost his grip on the rifle. Rin dragged him behind the cabinet shield. Mira helped Ivan rip the burst node free for one last use deeper inside. Sarah held her exposed line until Kale physically pulled her off it and sent Lisa to cover the final move. They reached the upper tower door, breathless, scraped, and carrying too little time. Below them, hunter teams regrouped instead of breaking off. That meant command had not accepted the partial. Burst is a loss. It meant the core mattered even more than before. The approach to control core ran through the inside of the weather relay tower, then across a reinforced transfer corridor with armored view, slits looking down into the storm. The corridor was clean, bright, and almost sterile after the ruined routes below. That cleanliness made it worse. The Academy still trusted this part of itself. Kale led the group through the tower interior with the copied strip in one hand and the portable node clipped at Myra's side. Tallis could still move, but his left arm was slowing. Sarah had burned through most of her spare charge. Ivan was exhausted and still thinking anyway, which made him dangerous in a useful way. Ren and Lisa covered the rear without being asked. At the end of the transfer corridor, a final blast door stood half open over the descending line into core approach. Beyond it, low system tones rolled upward through the floor. Kale stopped the group with one hand. What? Mira asked. He looked at the door frame, the active lock lights, the fresh seal foam on the lower track. This door should already be shut if the sweep is fully automated. Ivan understood first. So, it is being held open. Yes, for us. Ren asked. Kale did not soften the answer. Most likely. No one spoke after that. The meaning was plain. Someone above Lieutenant Vale, someone high enough to own the final wipe, was not merely reacting anymore. They were shaping the endgame, holding a path open just long enough to draw the surviving targets exactly where they could be finished with the proof in their hands. Tallis adjusted his grip on the rifle. Then why go in? Because the rest of the log is in there, Kale said. And because if we turn around now, they still close the core, still wipe the chain, and still rewrite the dead. That was the whole choice. Ugly and simple. He checked each face once. No speeches. No hero lines. Just reality. We move fast, he said. Stay close. If the door drops, no one stops in the threshold. Get through and keep moving. Myra's voice was tight, but steady. And if the core is already locked, then we break the line somewhere before the lock completes. Ivan let out a thin breath. That is a very calm way to describe a terrible plan. It is the only one we have. They went through. The descent hall beyond the blast door angled down toward control core in a line of black floor plates and white emergency lights. Narrow observation slits cut the walls every 20 yards. At the far end, another door waited under a ring of red indicators. Control core. Halfway down the hall, the tones changed. Not weather. Not maintenance. Personnel sweep. Kale felt the truth land before he saw the evidence. The door ahead was not just defending data. It was preparing to seal the whole sector with everyone inside it. He stopped at the last support break before the core threshold and looked at the red indicator ring over the final door. The status line on the wall was short enough to be understood at a glance. Purge shield preparing. Biological occupancy not exempt. He read it once and did not need a second look. The high command behind this had made the last decision already. If the proof could not be quietly erased, then the surviving witnesses would be erased with it and written off inside the same operation. Kale looked at the others, at their wet uniforms and scorched armor, and the raw fact that they had followed him this far. This is not just about the log anymore, he said. Mira saw it in his face. They're going to seal us in. Yes. Ren checked the corridor behind them. Then this is it. No, Kale said, eyes on the core door. This is the last door before it. He stepped forward, feeling the whole machine of Kharis Spire tighten around them, and understood with perfect clarity that the people above were no longer trying to save the Academy's story. They were ready to erase every living cadet who could contradict it. Control core was the last place in Kharis Spire that still looked untouched by panic. The floor plates were clean. The lights were steady. The big relay columns rose in white arcs around the weather relay main deck, humming with the calm force of a machine that still believed it was in control. Kale stepped through the final threshold with the surviving cadets at his back and reduced the entire room to one brutal line in his head. Get into the core. Stop the purge shield. Push the full. Log out before the Academy buried the dead and the living together. The direct threat was already visible. 3 command security operators in sealed gray armor held the inner approach to the log spine. Behind them, at the center console ring, stood the person Kale had expected to find long before he knew the name. Commandant Selvair, Senior Operations Chief for Kharis Spire, the officer whose signature sat at the edge of too many training loss reviews to be chance. Ver did not look surprised to see them. That was the worst part. I was hoping the range would finish the work below, Ver said. You made that more expensive than it needed to be. Kale spread the group with 2 short hand signals. Talis and Ren took the left support line. Sarah and Lisa moved right to the relay braces. Mira and Ivan dropped low near the data spine access, close enough to run when he opened a gap. No one asked for more than that. They were finally a team because they had no room left to be anything else. Inner line first, Kale said. Keep them off the consoles. Mira, Ivan, you move when I say move. Do not guess. Ver's eyes settled on him. Still issuing orders after all this? Kale kept his focus on the 3 operators and the live lock indicators over the core ring. Still alive after all this. The first exchange cracked across the main deck before the echo of his last word had died. The security operators opened from cover behind the console ribs. Talis answered from the left brace with hard, controlled fire. Rin cut the center lane. Sarah and Lisa pinned the right side operator long enough for Kale to cross half the open floor and slam into the nearest relay pillar. The room became a pattern of angles, light, and timing. That mattered more than force. The core was too open for blind aggression and too tight for a long fight. One wrong step would put a shot through a relay trunk or a cadet through the line of fire. Cale did what he had been doing since the staging deck. He read the structure before he read the people. The left operator favored his right knee every time he shifted to sight around cover. Rin caught that and drove him back with 2 low bursts. The center operator was better. He moved like someone who had run these lanes and drills for years and trusted the relay columns more than any person in the room. Cale watched him hold the same half-second pause every time the warning lights on the purge ring pulsed. Reflex. Training. Habit. Useful. Center pauses on the pulse, Cale said. Tallis did not waste a word answering. He waited for the next red pulse and leaned out exactly on it. The center operator flinched into his known rhythm, and Rin clipped the edge of his weapon line. The man fell back, not out of the fight, but out of the lane. Enough. Move, Cale snapped. Mira and Ivan broke from cover and sprinted low toward the log spine access. Ver saw it and hit a control tab on the inner ring. A new shield panel rose from the floor between the cadets and the spine. Too fast for Ivan to stop clean. He slid into its shoulder first, bounced hard, and nearly lost the portable burst node. Back, Mira shouted, dragging him down before the nearest operator could draw a line on them. So that was Ver's play. He was not defending the whole room equally. He was protecting the seconds between them and the data. Cale changed his angle, crossed behind the next pillar, and took one sharp shot at the operator on the right, not to hit him, but to force him deeper into cover. Then he looked straight at the floor seam where the new shield had risen. It was not a random wall. It was a retractable purge divider. That mattered because Cale had seen that kind of hardware before in maintenance diagrams. The divider's job was to separate zones before venting or sealing. That meant it had to follow safety timing. It could not rise and complete a vent cycle in the same beat without tripping a hold. A machine that erased people still had to obey its own maintenance logic. Ver can lock the room, Mira said from cover. He can keep us out of the spine all day. No, Cale said. Not all day. Ver heard him. You think you understand this system because you found crawl spaces and copied scraps. Cale looked at the pulsing indicator ring over the divider. I understand that you trust the system more than the people in it. For the first time, Ver's expression changed. That told Cale he was close enough. The left operator tried to flank Tallis. Lisa caught the movement and forced him back. Sarah shifted too far to help and took a near hit that burned a line across her upper sleeve. She stumbled, recovered, and stayed on her feet. There was no clean heroism in it. Just pain, focus, and refusal to drop. The center lane opened for half a second. Cale took it. He ran. The first 3 steps carried him behind one console rib. The next 2 brought him straight into the dead zone beneath the purge divider's visual line. He dropped to one knee, looked once at the maintenance notch under the floor seam, and felt the whole solution settle into place. The divider could not complete a hard purge seal with a technician inside the dead zone. It had to confirm clear volume first. Ver was relying on the operators to keep that volume clean because he believed no cadet would know the notch existed. Cale had spent months learning what command assumed cadets never saw. Ver, he said, loud enough to carry. You already lost the lower range. Ver's gaze flicked toward him at exactly the wrong moment. Cale shoved his arm into the manual maintenance recess and hit the emergency inspection toggle. The purge divider froze halfway through its next cycle. The whole room changed shape in an instant. Now, Cale shouted. Mira and Ivan ran again. The inner core console zone was smaller than the main deck and far more dangerous. Wide arcs of data flowed up through the log spine into the central control ring where Ver stood. The floor around it was divided into narrow maintenance lanes and live access pads. Every wrong surface could lock, vent, or cut a route in half if Ver still had enough control. He did. Mira slid to the spine port first and slammed the burst node into a live receiver slot. Ivan hit the secondary interface with both hands and started pulling the protected logs out of the nested core layers. It was not a magic download. It was more like forcing open a series of locked drawers while someone else tried to slam them shut. Tallis and Rin kept the operators off the inner line. Sarah and Lisa shifted to the side braces, firing only when they had a clean lane, because now every missed shot risked the heart of the system. Kale went straight for Ver. The commandant stepped back from the console and drew a compact sidearm, but he was slower than the operators because he had never expected a cadet to breach the divider at all. Kale hit his weapon arm first, drove it wide, and slammed him into the console ring hard enough to break the clean calm of the room at last. Ver fought mean, not sloppy. That made sense. He was not a frontline soldier, but he had spent a career in command spaces where weakness got noticed and remembered. He used the edges of the console, the narrow lanes, and the shifting floor just as ruthlessly as Kale used structure. No wasted words. No speech about hard choices. Just elbows, body weight, and one brutal attempt to shove Kale across a live access pad. Kale twisted free, caught the rail, and kicked Ver backward into the console edge. "Stop the purge," he said. Ver laughed once, breathless. "The purge protects the academy. It protects your record. It protects command." That was honest, and honesty finally made him small. Behind them, Ivan's voice cut through the fight. "The logs are nested behind a final safety hold. I can keep them live or send them. Not both." Mira looked up from the console. "If we send now, does it all go?" "Not unless the main ring stays open." Ver heard that too. He slammed a palm onto the console side and tried to force the core into a fast lock. Warning lights flared. The console refused the command. Kale saw why before Ver did. The same technician's safety logic that had frozen the divider had now flagged active bodies inside the core ring. The system would not complete a full hard lock with personnel still inside its protected maintenance zone unless a senior operator confirmed override from two separate points. 2 points. Kale did not jump straight to the answer. He caught one detail, then another. Ver always used the same motion when he issued paired commands. Left hand to the primary rail. Right thumb to the side tab. Kale had seen a version of that pattern at the staging deck glass, then again in Vale's Chamberlain history, and now here under pressure. Habit. There was a blind spot. Kale drove Ver sideways, hooked one arm over the commandant's shoulder, and pinned his right hand against the console rim just short of the side tab. Not dramatic. Not elegant. Just enough. "Mira," Kale said through clenched teeth. "Primary rail only. He needs the side confirm." Understanding hit her face instantly. She reached across the console and opened the full archive chain. Ver surged with sudden strength, trying to break loose. Rin saw it from the outer line and shifted inward, taking the center operator's return fire across his plate long enough to keep the lane open. He staggered but stayed upright. That was the cost. Ivan's fingers flew over the interface. Full chain visible. "I can send it." "Do it," Mira said. Ver stopped fighting for one raw second and looked at Kale with something that was no longer contempt. It was fear, not of death, of exposure. "You think they will thank you for this?" he said. "The academy will burn every class before it lets command authority rot in public." Kale held him harder. "Then let it burn in public." Ivan hit the send path. The log spine brightened so sharply the whole core seemed to inhale. Archive records, route overrides, purge authorizations, incident reviews, and the selected name chains surged out of the local net and up into the external academic review grid. The inter-campus relay and every oversight node Ver had thought he could outrun by controlling one storm range on one world. Mira stared at the transmission line, not trusting it until the second confirmation flashed. "External receipt," she said. Ivan almost laughed from exhaustion. Again, the second confirmation hit a heartbeat later. Kale did not turn that moment into a grand thought. He only saw the receipt line hold steady on the board and knew the truth was no longer trapped inside this room. That should have ended it, but systems built to bury the truth always had one last reflex. The core alarms shifted from purge to structural lockdown. If the log could not be erased, the room itself would try to seal and vent. "Out!" Talis shouted from the main deck. "Now!" The surviving operator on the right made one last desperate push across the brace lane. Lisa dropped him behind a relay column. The operator on the left was already down and disarmed. The center operator looked at the external receipt line flashing over the ring and made the only smart choice anyone from command had made all day. He backed away from the fight and lowered his weapon. Ver did not. He twisted violently, tried to wrench free of Kale, and hit the emergency purge anyway, maybe out of doctrine, maybe out of spite. Kale shifted his grip and drove him backward into the half-raised divider track. The maintenance lock, still frozen from earlier, clamped at the wrong moment when Ver stumbled into its line. The commandant went down hard, pinned and unable to reach the controls he had trusted more than people. Alive, trapped, visible. That was better than a clean ending for him. Mira ripped the burst node free. Ivan copied one last receipt stamp to its local memory. Ren, breathing hard through the damage to his plate, took rear position beside Tallis. Sarah checked Lisa with one fast glance. Both nodded. Good enough. We have a route. Tallis asked. Kale looked once at the side status board. The structural lockdown was sealing the main entrance first. The maintenance notch under the divider was still open because the freeze logic had not fully cleared. Small. Ugly. Possible. Low exit, Kale said. Under the divider. One at a time. Fust. No one argued. Again. Mira went first with the note. Ivan after her. Sarah and Lisa dropped low and slid through the narrow maintenance gap into the service lane beyond. Rin shoved Tallis when his damaged arm slowed him at exactly the wrong moment. Then Tallis turned and dragged Rin the last foot after him. Kale was last. Vayer, pinned against the divider track, looked up at him with rainwater, sweat, and lost authority on his face. You still do not understand what you have done. Kale paused just long enough to answer. That is the first honest thing anyone here gets to decide for themselves. Then he dropped under the divider and came up in the service lane as the main core door slammed shut behind him. The service lane shook once, twice, then steadied. No vent. No perikimplition. Kale listened to the silence that followed and understood why the system had stalled. Too many outside nodes now had the receipts. Too many lines beyond Kharis Spire knew what Control Core had tried to do. The burial had failed. Silence. The upper academy recovery deck did not feel like recovery. It felt to Kale like the moment after a lie breaks, and everyone in the room has to decide whether they are shocked or only embarrassed it did not break sooner. Medical teams met them at the sealed lift when they emerged from the upper service lane. Not command security. Not training staff. Real emergency crews, drawn by the outside receipt storm and the structural alarms. The surviving cadets were taken into light triage, given blankets, scans, and water, then moved into an inquiry bay ringed with glass and too many eyes. Kale sat on the edge of a low bench while MedTech sealed the cut across his forearm. Across the room, Run had his plate stripped and his shoulder patched. Sarah and Lisa sat side by side, both upright from pure stubbornness. Tallis refused the rolling chair offered to him and stood instead with one arm in a support sling, glaring at every officer who passed as if daring one of them to explain the day in a way he could not break apart with his bare hands. Mira crossed the room and stopped in front of Kale. For a second, she said nothing. Then she let out a breath. I voted to push you to the edge route. I remember. I know. She looked away once, then back. You still came back for all of us. Kale rested his forearms on his knees. You were on the list too. That was not forgiveness. It was not a speech. It was simply the truth that had governed the whole day. Mira gave a small nod because she understood the difference. Nearby, Ivan sat with the portable node in his lap, even though the thing had already been copied 3 times by external investigators. He looked at it like someone who had spent his life believing files were quiet objects and had just learned that files could chase people through storms. The inquiry glass beyond the bay had changed color from clear to active. External review teams were arriving. Off-world academic oversight. Military auditors. Civilian safety boards. More signals than Kharis Spire Command could block now that the full chain had escaped. The Academy was no longer arguing whether something had happened. It was arguing who had known and how far the rot reached. Tallis came over last. He stopped beside Kale, looking down at him with the same broad frame and hard face that had once stood on the vote deck asking for his removal from the primary team. I was wrong, Tallis said. Kale looked up. Tallis did not dress it up. About what you were. About what you were doing. About who in this place was actually dangerous. That was as close to an apology as someone like Tallis would ever get. It was enough because it cost him something real to say it in front of the others. Run, sitting 2 beds away, gave a short, bitter laugh. We all voted on the wrong threat. No one argued with that either. An investigator approached the bay rail and asked for Kale Arden by a full name and cadet band. Kale stood when called, not because he trusted the process, but because the process could no longer happen in the dark. That was the difference now. He handed over the damaged slate, the copied strip, and a memory of every route, every lock, every line Vare and Vale had spoken. He did it without drama, piece by piece. Enough for the record. Enough to kill the lie. When the questioning paused, the investigator asked the thing most people eventually asked when they met someone who had walked into a system already suspecting it was rotten. Why stay in the academy at all? She said. Why not take what you knew and go elsewhere? Kale looked through the inquiry glass toward the storm outside. Sereth Vale still flashed under the shield line, huge and indifferent and honest in the way weather always was. Because if I left too early, he said, the next class would walk into the same range. That answer spread through the room more quietly than any speech could have. He did not wait for praise after that. He did not want it. While the others spoke to med teams and inquiry staff, Kale signed a formal statement, declined the offer of escorted rest, and stepped out onto the upper recovery corridor where the academy lights met the storm glass. From what Kale could see, Kharis Spire would not bury this one. Too many receipts. Too many names. Too many living cadets had walked out with the same story. As Kale stood by the glass, a junior review clerk hurried past with a stack of opened archive requests glowing across her tablet. Most were marked. From a same-range family. One was not. It came from another academy on another world. And the subject line used a phrase Kale knew too well. Training loss review. He watched it disappear down the corridor and said nothing. What had happened inside Kharis Spire was over. The larger pattern outside it might not be.